How do you take a scattered collection of bickering Greek city-states, devastated by decades of war, and turn them into the launchpad for the greatest military campaign in human history? How does a kingdom most Greeks used to mock as barbarian produce not one but two military masterminds who reshaped the ancient world? And why is the man who conquered from the Mediterranean to the edge of India remembered with a name that sounds like a mid-tier soccer nickname? This is the real story of how Philip II of Macedon revolutionized warfare, conquered a broken Greece with brain and steel, and laid the foundation for his son, Alexander the Great, to launch a campaign that would crush the Persian Empire, terrify the known world, and change history forever. It starts not with Alexander but with his father. The Peloponnesian War had just gutted Greece. After nearly 3 decades of brutal conflict between Athens and Sparta, the once glorious city-states were drained, economically shattered, militarily exhausted, politically fragmented. Athens had lost its empire. Sparta had won the war, but quickly found itself overstretched and diplomatically isolated. Thebes tried to fill the vacuum, but lacked the unity or vision to hold Greece together. City-states turned inward, constant infighting, mercenaries replacing citizen soldiers. Loyalty was for sale. Into this vacuum walked Philip II of Macedon, a man who understood that Greece didn't need more warlords, it needed a revolution in warfare. Philip II didn't just inherit a throne, he inherited a problem. In 359 BCE, Macedon was politically unstable, surrounded by hostile neighbors, and treated by the southern Greeks as a crude, tribal backwater. Its army was little more than a militia, poorly equipped and loosely organized. But within 2 decades, Philip would transform this overlooked kingdom into the single most disciplined and advanced military power in the Greek world. His secret weapon wasn't just the sarissa, though it gets most of the spotlight. It was systematic innovation. He started with structure. Philip reorganized the Macedonian infantry into a professional standing army, something almost unheard of in Greek warfare, which was largely seasonal and citizen-based. Soldiers now trained year-round, drilled in complex formations, and followed a strict chain of command. Loyalty wasn't just to the city or the cause, it was to Philip personally. Then came the phalanx. Unlike the traditional hoplite formation of short spears and large shields, Philip's Macedonian phalanx wielded 20-foot pikes held with 2 hands. These spears, the sarissas, extended 5 full ranks deep, creating a literal wall of spear tips long before enemies could get close. It turned infantry combat into a deadly game of reach, and no city-state phalanx could match it. But Philip knew the phalanx alone wouldn't win wars. It could hold the line, but it needed support. So he built a multi-layered military machine: light infantry, skirmishers, archers, and most importantly, the companion cavalry, a highly trained unit of noble-born horsemen, personally loyal to the king. They didn't just harass from the flanks, they charged into enemy gaps, broke formations, and sealed victories. And behind it all was Philip's greatest strength, his mind. He combined Theban tactical theory with his own battlefield intuition. At Thebes, as a hostage in his youth, he'd studied under Epaminondas, the man who broke Sparta. He took that asymmetric warfare and made it doctrine. His famous use of the oblique advance, where one wing of his army held back while the other smashed forward, let him manipulate the battlefield like a chessboard, often turning numerical disadvantages into decisive wins. This wasn't evolution, it was military revolution, and it was just getting started. By 338 BCE, Philip's army was no longer just Macedonian, it was a finely tuned war engine, tested on the northern frontiers and now aimed squarely at southern Greece. His conquests in Thrace, Illyria, and Thessaly weren't just territorial, they were rehearsals. Each campaign sharpened the phalanx, trained the cavalry, and expanded his influence. But uniting Greece meant confronting its greatest cities directly, Athens and Thebes. Despite years of decline, both still carried weight. Athens had the legacy of empire and a navy to back it. Thebes had a proud military tradition and a lingering grudge from Philip's time as a hostage. When Philip began consolidating the Greek world under his new League of Corinth, both cities saw it for what it was, a polite-sounding Macedonian takeover. And so, against all odds, they set aside their rivalry and formed a desperate coalition. Their armies met Philip's forces on the plain of Chaeronea, in Boeotia. It would be a decisive clash, not just of armies, but of entire ways of war. The old Greek model of citizen militias stubbornly holding their formations versus Philip's hybrid machine of professionals, specialists, and precision tactics. Philip took the right wing. On the left, he gave command to his 18-year-old son, Alexander, not as a favor, but as a test. And what followed was a masterclass in deception and timing. Philip engaged the Athenian wing directly, but then began a controlled withdrawal, drawing them in, stretching their line, and creating a subtle gap in the center. The Athenian hoplites, thinking they had momentum, pressed forward in disorder. That was the signal. On the left, Alexander led a brutal cavalry assault, crashing into the Theban sacred band, an elite unit feared throughout Greece. But even the sacred band couldn't hold. Alexander's timing, combined with the relentless pressure from the Macedonian infantry, shattered the line. The Thebans stood their ground until the last man, but they were overwhelmed. The Athenians, seeing their allies crushed and their formation crumbling, broke and fled. By sunset, the battlefield belonged to Macedon. Thousands lay dead, and with them, the old dream of an independent city-state dominated Greece. Philip didn't sack Athens or raze Thebes. He didn't need to. He had proved something far more enduring. Greece had a new master, and standing beside him, bloodied but unshaken, was the young man who would take this victory and use it as a springboard to challenge the greatest empire the world had ever seen. In 336 BCE, Alexander III of Macedon became king. He inherited an army trained to perfection, a united Greece, and a plan Philip had already started, the invasion of the Persian Empire. Now, Persia wasn't just any neighbor, it was the largest empire the world had ever seen, sprawling from modern-day Turkey all the way to India. But Alexander wasn't intimidated. In 334 BCE, he crossed the Hellespont with about 40,000 men, a fraction of the Persian army's size, and landed in Asia Minor. At the Battle of the Granicus River, he didn't wait for the perfect moment. He led a frontal cavalry charge across a river, through a Persian line of satraps and mercenaries. He nearly died, but the shock value, devastating victory, just like that. A year later, Alexander met Darius III himself at Issus. Darius had the numbers, but the battlefield, a narrow coastal plain, neutralized his advantage. Alexander used terrain, timing, and his companion cavalry to once again punch straight through the Persian lines. Darius fled. Then came Gaugamela in 331 BCE. This was Darius' final stand. Chariots, war elephants, over 100,000 troops, an open plain perfect for Persian mobility. Alexander responded by staging a fake retreat, pulling Persian forces out of alignment. Then he drove the cavalry straight at the center again, right where Darius was standing. Darius fled again, and that was it. Persia collapsed. Babylon, Susa, Persepolis, all of it fell. But Alexander didn't stop. When the city of Tyre refused to let him sacrifice at their temple, he didn't take no for an answer. Tyre was an island fortress, walls stretching into the sea, unbreachable by land, so Alexander built a causeway stone by stone, half a mile into the sea, under arrow fire, under siege weapon attacks for 8 months. Then he broke through the walls and slaughtered or enslaved most of the population. Next, Egypt. There was no battle. Egyptians welcomed him as a liberator from Persian rule. They made him pharaoh, declared him divine. He founded Alexandria, the first of many cities to bear his name. Then he turned east, into India, across the Indus, into battle with King Porus, who brought war elephants and tall, armored soldiers. Alexander still won, but barely, and now his army was tired, homesick. Marching through deserts and jungles for years, they were done. At the Hephaestus River, they refused to go further. Alexander, furious, finally turned back. On the way back, he started adopting Persian customs, dressing like a king of Asia, marrying Persian nobility, even trying to force his Greek officers to bow in the Persian style. It didn't go over well. His inner circle became divided. Morale dipped. Some of his closest companions died, others were executed. Still, Alexander made it back to Babylon and began planning an even bigger campaign into Arabia. But in 323 BCE, at just 32 years old, he fell ill after a banquet. Fever, alcohol, poison? No one knows. He died without naming a clear successor. His generals asked, "To whom do you leave the empire?" And Alexander supposedly said, "To the strongest." What followed was chaos. His top generals, Ptolemy, Seleucus, Antigonus, Lysimachus, fought each other in the wars of the Diadochi, carving the empire into pieces. Ptolemy took Egypt and started a dynasty that lasted 300 years, ending with Cleopatra. Seleucus built a sprawling eastern empire. The rest? Endless war. The empire never came back together. And somehow, after all that, after conquering 3 continents, fighting elephants, laying siege to island cities, being crowned god-king, and burning the greatest palaces in the ancient world, we decided to call him Alexander the Great. That's it. No breaker of empires, no storm of the East, not even Alexander the Unstoppable. Just great. Come on. If you conquer the known world by age 32, and the best we can come up with is the same word we use to describe a cheeseburger or a Marvel movie, we owe the man better. If this story blew your mind or made you yell at your screen about ancient warfare, go ahead and like this video, subscribe for more epic history deep dives, and tap the bell so you don't miss a future upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, great is just the start.